Hello, my name's James Rees. You're back at the Razorwire podcast. We're here to interview me today. Some of my staff members have decided that it would be a fantastic idea to kick off a whole plethora of interviews that we have with industry figures. To start with me, which normally would be awful, but apparently I'm not allowed to say that on camera. So basically over the next couple of weeks, months, whatever, we're going to be inviting a number of CISOs, penetration testers, other kind of leading figures in the information security industry, and maybe a few outside of it in the more business aspects of industry, maybe CTOs, that kind of thing as well, to get kind of an all-rounded view of information security, what it means to be in information security, some of the challenges some of these people have faced, just so as you're deciding where you want to go within this particular sector, you have the ability to kind of draw upon some of their experience, maybe some of the gotchas that they've got, and it'll help you along a little bit more. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Abby, in charge of our marketing department.
Hi.
She's going to be the voice very much off the camera today. So without further ado, I'll get nice and comfortable. Go.
Okay, so this is an easy one to start with.
I like easy.
How did you get into infosec, and how has your career path changed since you started?
Oh, I got into infosec many years ago. About just over 20 years ago, I was actually in IT. I was in first and second line support in IT for a couple of different companies, but most notably a big reinsurance company based out of London, or the European part was based out of London. Hi guys, if you're watching this. Basically, that's kind of where it started in the kind of more technological side of things, because back then, we had information security, but it was a lot less advanced, a lot less further along than it is nowadays. Back then it was quite early in technology. I mean, we were talking around sort of like the 2000s. Y2K had just happened. I'd been part of that whole era as well, and the nightmare that was. But basically one day I was asked to take control of kind of like the antivirus side of things. So nobody was really looking after it at the time. I got involved. That was way back in the early days of McAfee, and I spent most of my time making sure the AV was up to date, that it was regularly scanning, that any kind of viruses that it found or anything that it found would get reported back to us, and then obviously we would handle those. And again, don't forget, it was back in the very early days where the internet was still relatively new, and it was a bit of a wild place to exist, because we didn't have any of the kind of laws, the technology, the ability to see what people were sending one another. I mean, this was in the very early days of email. So you used to get a lot of spicy things being sent around, and quite often you would end up with some kind of virus or something down the lines. It was quite rife back then. So I did that for a couple of years and started taking over control of some of the firewalling infrastructure as well, and became a bit of the go-to guy for technical security. From there, I kind of came to the conclusion that was really an underrepresented space within IT at the time. So I decided to start looking into other things I could do in that space. From there, I moved on to consultancy, and then on and so on and so forth through various other sort of consulting roles, sort of permanent roles, that kind of thing, until I started Razorthorn sort of back in sort of 2008, just after I got made redundant from a particularly well-known publishing newspaper. And it's kind of gone from there, really. I mean, why did I get into it? Because it was exciting, I think, probably the best way to describe it. Again, it was very early days of security. We had a lot less security solutions, services and software than we do nowadays. So you really had to think on your feet a lot, and I always worked particularly well with that. So that's kind of how it all began, in a roundabout way. I mean, there's a few other things in there, but let's hear about the other questions. Maybe I can answer some of those in forthcoming questions. By the way, I haven't seen any of these, so I'm in the dark.
What kind of challenges does someone in your position face in this industry?
What, somebody who runs a security company or somebody who's just an infosec professional?
A bit of both, I think.
So from an infosec professional perspective, some of the challenges that we face really are based around the fact that you never quite know what's going to happen. You never quite know when the next vulnerability is going to come out. You never quite know how big it's going to be. You never quite know, what the latest attack patterns are going to be. You have to be very, very adaptable, and you have to spend a lot of time doing a lot of research, analysing patterns, having a look at data maybe coming out of other people in the industry and what they're saying. Nowadays, we get a much better set of data feeds from some of the vendors. So people like Cofense, that kind of thing, will provide quite a good bit of data about the latest type of phishing attacks coming out. And with the situation we currently are in, we're seeing a massive uptick in phishing attacks, all related around this particular bug that's going around at the moment. And it's basically caused havoc. And you can never tell when events like that are going to happen. Back in the early days, when I was sort of just starting to get really into infosec, we had this thing called the I love you virus. And all it was really a simple email that went around that said I love you with an attachment attached to it. And it would normally come from somebody you knew. So, since security awareness was pretty low back then, it went like wildfire around the City of London, in fact, around pretty much everybody. And it was big news back in the day. That's part of the challenge, but part of the good thing about infosec. You never quite know what you're really going to be getting into, be it going to customers, be it working directly for an organisation. Every day is going to be slightly different. As to running an infosec company, I think again it's very much keeping up with what's going on, and the problem we have from a technological viewpoint is obviously every year bigger and better technology is coming out, it's being designed. We have to look forward into the future and try and see what technology is going to be dominant, and start planning for securing that kind of environment. I mean, everybody at the moment is talking about AI, and it's a personal hatred of mine when I hear people saying, oh, it's fueled by AI, or it's run by AI. It's not run by AI. AI is something separate, entirely. But AI is where things are going. Artificial intelligence, there's a lot of big key players who are working in that space. So, I try to look as a business owner and a security professional, what is this space going to look like in, say, 5 years' time or even 10 years' time? We will probably have decent AI by then. I'm not talking about the world-ending, robot-creating, Terminator, Skynet type stuff, or I hope not. But as technology gets more advanced, especially things like AI, not only can people use AI for good, like for security software, for helping analyze events, that kind of thing, but you can bet your bottom dollar that the criminals are going to be using a similar kind of technology to be used in the opposite direction, to try to help compromise people in order to steal their assets, and then, make money out of it, or whatever they're going to do with those assets. Commonly is to make some form of cash out of it. Another area, for instance, which is looking quite interesting, is the cryptocurrency side of things. You know, a very, very different environment from the kind of banking environments that we're in at the moment. Fiat currency is run in a particular way, but with cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, it's very different. There's a totally different landscape behind it. And it's very hard to be current in information security. You know, just the same in many respects as IT. You know, if you're an expert in one very niche area of IT, time will move on, and eventually you'll find your skill set will be either dead, gone, or you know, will evolve, and you'll have to evolve with it. InfoSec's a tough one. It really is. I wouldn't say it's for the faint of heart, and it's very easy to kind of get complacent as well. You know, if you put all your policies together, you put your procedures together, you know, everything's running the way that you want it to run, you just end up sitting there and maintaining it. So, you know, you always have to be looking forward. You always have to be sort of moving in the direction you think that things are going to go, and sometimes you're going to be wrong, you know, and you need to very quickly readapt and go back into other areas.
So you said it's not for the faint of heart, but what kind of personal skills might somebody need if they were going to start working in InfoSec? Because obviously you need some kind of qualification as well, but there must be personal skills that match up with this profession.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of, I mean, I suppose what they call them is soft skills, really. You know, you've got the more kind of security-centric certifications and skills to have, like knowing risk management if you're in governance, knowing how to write policies and procedures. You know, that's all the kind of governance side of things. And then you've got the cyber security side of things, which is the more technical side, you know. But yeah, you know, I think what a lot of people overview is maybe some of the soft skills. And one of my mentors, a guy called John Kerr, hello John, if you're watching, he was very big on teaching me and getting me to understand the value of psychology and neuro-linguistic programming, body language, that kind of thing. Because quite often, you know, information security people in the industry are sometimes viewed as a little bit of a challenge. You know, we tend to deal a lot with a lot of negative subject matters, so we're viewed quite negatively. Also, sometimes you have to do investigations on people who you might consider friends within an organisation. Sometimes, if you're consulting, you've got to kind of build confidence with the customer that you really understand what you're doing, and knowing how to communicate with people, knowing body language, knowing basic psychology really, really helps to build that rapport with the people that you're there to either help or maybe even there to discover maybe doing something wrong within an environment. If you're tasked to find out where, you know, a whole plethora of money has disappeared, for instance, then it's useful to have those kinds of skills when you're doing interviewing. You know, you can usually spot it. But yeah, you know, very much psychology, communication skills, both written and spoken. I think those are really, really key. Patience is another good one. Some of the investigations I've done in the past have been done over many, many months, and it's very easy to kind of jump the gun, or it's very easy to come to a conclusion quickly because you're getting frustrated that you're having to sift through information, or you're having to wait for an event to occur so you can jump on it. Patience gets overlooked a hell of a lot. And the ability to adapt and think outside the box, you know, is that a soft skill or a way that you are? I've always said that, you know, a lot of information security is based on your mindset. Whether you're going to be very, very good at it is also based on your mindset. You know, if you're very analytical and you're very procedural driven, then cybersecurity tends to be a lot better, a lot easier going for you. You know, governance, you need to have a lot more kind of comm skills. You have to get on with the business owners as well as the C-suite, as well as those employees as well, because, you know, you have to build information security into the culture. And in order to do that, you've got to build it in a way that those people are going to accept. Well, if you're putting in all kinds of things to, that they perceive as being difficult to work with or preventing them from doing something, then they're not going to follow it. And then they're not going to have any respect for any of the infosec stuff that you're doing. So, getting your mindset, getting some of your soft skills should be every bit as important as whatever particular discipline you're going for within infosec. I mean, a quick word on certifications. I'm not a big fan of them, and maybe that's slightly controversial, but I think there are certain certifications out there that show a particular standard of infosec person. CISM, for instance, PCI DSS QSA, ISO 27001 lead auditor, CISSP. There's a number of certifications which are considered kind of very main certifications, but then there's a whole plethora of other certifications that relate to a single product or a very low end corner of security that you really don't need. Maybe it's a way to springboard into a slightly better position to get some of the gold standard certifications like the CISM, for instance. But don't judge the quality of an infosec person just solely on the certifications they have. It does mean they've reached a certain level of knowledge, but I've met people with a CISM, CISSP that I've stood there and thought, geez, how did you get that? Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's because they operate in a very different way from myself. But certifications doesn't make a quality infosec person. It's those soft skills that really do that.
Okay. Is there anything important that people should understand about being a CISO or running an infosec company that they might not know from just reading?
Definitely those soft skills that I've just mentioned. Definitely the patience value. I think the rapport side of it is important as well. A lot of the stuff in the books is going to teach you how to do things like risk management, or they're going to teach you how to write a policy, and they're going to teach you how to do it in line with ISO or PCI. There's a lot of good material out there. You have to find the material that really works for you. When I got into infosec, I was very much working in the kind of reinsurance space. So my view on risk management will be very different from somebody who came out of, say, fintech or banking. Does it make either of us wrong? No. But it's just the experience that we've had. And part of the challenge that you will find is, especially when you start putting yourself out there like I am to a certain extent, you are going to get other infosec people who will possibly be very vocal about whether or not they agree with you. That's fine. We all operate in different ways. We all have different experiences. But, this is why we're doing these podcasts and why we're going to be interviewing a lot of other people, so you can get that viewpoint of what it's like to be a CISO, because a CISO's experience in information security is going to be on a very different type of experience than, say, a penetration testers. Pen testers are some of the most intelligent people I've ever met when it comes to technology and that kind of thing. Sometimes their comms are really, really good, but sometimes, these are people who spend a lot of their time trying to ethically break into places that they wouldn't normally get into. So, understanding the relevance of other people within the industry's skill sets and mindsets, again, I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And sometimes from outside of the infosec side of things, another big challenge is how other people see you. I mean, back in the early days of infosec, infosec people used to get called all kinds of things. Glorified security guards was one you used to hear quite a bit. They didn't really consider you a techie. Even if you were in the IT department, you were the security guy. You were the guy that they go to get told no, was something you used to get quite a bit. And I learned very early on not to say no, but to say, let's look at this objectively. Let's look at this from a realistic perspective. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But security is a really, really big part of the business world nowadays, and it's not going to change. The more we go to a digital world, the more we go to more sort of digital-based assets, it's only going to become more and more important. Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
in a roundabout way?
In a roundabout way. There's probably time for one more question, which is, we have just entered lockdown 2. I just wondered what effect you think this is going to have on other organisations' security budgets or just general infosec in the community now. I mean, what do you think it's going to happen?
This is a tough one. You will hear from a lot of different people that the times are unprecedented, and they are. You know, we haven't had a situation like this in the past. In the last year, we've seen a massive amount of disruption in the business world. There are large businesses that before all of this, who were so solid you never thought they would ever sort of die off. Some of the travel companies, the sort of people who deal with kind of like the planes, building planes, sort of running airlines, that kind of thing. These were some of the companies that were making the most money, out of any industry, and now they're on their knees. I don't think there's anyone in any particular sector who's not suffered from this, especially the hospitality sector. I mean, wow, we go through many months of lockdown the first time round, and now we're going through another set now. How's this going to look at the end of it? Who knows? How long is it going to go on for? The government said a month. They said they'll review it on the 2nd, whether or not they extend it, or whether or not we're going to have another lockdown or a set of lockdowns next year. Nobody can tell. And I think part of the problem there is that issue with not knowing where this is going or when it's going to end or when it's going to reach a point where people can get back to a normal life scares businesses, it scares people, and a lot of businesses at the moment who aren't doing particularly well, and that's a vast majority of the business sector. I say the business sector, it's not a sector, it's a collection of sectors, but people are doing so badly at the moment that they're just holding on to their budgets. They're too scared just in case they will need them because we go into another lockdown or because an event's going to happen. Staff are being shed like water across the board. Now that furlough's been extended again, as the news was yesterday, I kind of predicted that a lot of people would be being made redundant around about now, and we have had quite a big raft of it. And according to HMRC, those figures are pretty horrible in the UK. God knows what it's like in the States at the moment. I mean, we hear the horror stories, and you see sort of like the podcasts and what have you about how it is in the States, but because we're not there, we're having to rely on that information. Certain industries are way up. Technology industry, for instance, is doing quite well at the moment, but mainly because whole entire swaths of companies are now rebuilding the way that they work to going from everybody in a single central office, say in Canary Wharf or somewhere in the West End or North London or South London or South Bank or wherever, to being very much more remote based. From a work perspective, that's great because you can spend a bit more time with the kids, you can do a few things around the house that you want to do and still do your work, and you don't have to pay the God knows how much it costs to jump on a train and travel for an hour to get to work and then an hour back in the evening. It's saving a hell of a lot of time. So there's a lot of good stuff there. But also on the flip side of that, security hasn't quite caught up with the real world yet. And, lots of money was spent on building out VPN capabilities for a lot of companies. They could always cater for a certain amount of remote workers. That has been a fact of life for a while. But all of your workers? No. And certain companies in certain industries who have, say, call centres with highly sensitive information being sort of communicated to people in call centres, like banking institutions, insurance institutions, that kind of thing, they are really, really struggling because, you know, how do you guarantee the security of the data that people are dealing with when they're sat at home at their, you know, kitchen table or, you know, on their sofa or what, you know, taking calls from customers, that kind of thing. I've mentioned a few times in some of the stuff that I've written and some of the other stuff that we've produced that we are going to go through a big security paradigm shift. And I still firmly believe that. We are going to be going from, you know, a centralized model where everything sits in a sort of kind of secure bubble with defense in depth, like layers of an onion. You'll hear a lot of this going forward. But now it's starting to get to the point where we're going to have to start considering far more security at the endpoint, far more solutions to cater for endpoint security than we previously did. It's going to be a very different world going forward. Whether that starts now or whether that starts next year, I don't know. I'm hoping it's going to start sooner rather than later, and the reason for that is criminals, malicious actors, you know, they are quick to jump on any opportunity to take advantage, and they're going to start seriously taking advantage of this. You may even see a return of the more traditional kind of virus, for instance. Good example. More social engineering, getting people to open up things or go to websites, or, you know, phishing attacks. Obviously, they're on the rise as well because you don't quite have the kind of security that you do when you're in one big bubble environment. To a certain extent, some of that's been happening a little bit anyway because people have been moving from on-premise technological infrastructure to off-premise cloud-based stuff. So there has been a bit of that. But this has just suddenly thrown, you know, that whole concept of centralized security completely out the window. That is, I think, going to be the key going forward. Fixing that, not issue, but living, you know, fixing that reality and making it a security feature we could do with a more centralized infrastructure. So thank you for coming in and listening to the interview. It's going to be great to see what some of the other guys, as I mentioned before, will say about similar kind of questions. Each set of questions may be slightly different because it will be very much dependent on the type of industry or what part of the security industry those people are in. So it won't be the same set of questions all the time. But, you know, we're looking forward to sitting down and learning a bit more about this industry from other people's perspectives, and hopefully, you know, you guys will gain a lot of benefit from that. I'm also going to continue on with some of the other stuff, some of the other video blogs where we go over the mentality of being an infosec, some of the things that I think are important. And we're going to cover those in detail later on. I mean, obviously I've covered a few of them very lightly today, but it's going to be very much content going forward. If there's any aspect of infosec you do want me to cover, or if you've got any questions, then please feel free to put them down in the comments or email them through. You'll see a sort of link and communications details down in the description below. Please feel free to like and subscribe and press the little notification bell. That'd be fantastic. And look after yourselves going forward. Thank you ever so much for attending, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.